Hey everyone, and welcome to this video on adding and subtracting real numbers. So let's get the show on the road. All right, let's start by adding some numbers. Now we've got 6 addition problems in front of you right now. What I'd like you to do is to pause the video and please take care of just the first 3 addition problems. All right, now I hope those weren't too tough for you, but one way that I really like to think about adding positive numbers is adding a positive number to another number can be thought of as starting at the original number on the number line, then moving to the right on the number line as many units as the number being added. So while I'm sure that these 3 original problems weren't tough at all, I'd love for us to start thinking about addition of positive numbers with regard to the number line. So for instance, for our first example, we started at the number 3 on the real number line. And by adding 2, that means move 2 units to the right. And of course, we ended up at 5, which is our sum. In the second example, we started at the number 15 on the real number line. And by adding 8, we went 8 units to the right. And of course, what's 8 units to the right of 15? That's 23, which was our sum. And in our last example, we started at 12 on the real number line. And by adding 9 to 12, we went 9 units to the right on the real number line and ended up at the number 21, our sum. And with that in mind, we've got 3 more addition problems below, and what I'd like you to do is to pause the video and please take care of these 3 problems. All right, now I hope those last 3 went well for you. And again, when we're adding positive numbers, just think of that as moving to the right on the real number line. All right, what about subtracting positive numbers? Well, one way I like to think about subtracting positive numbers is subtracting a positive number from another number can be thought of as starting at the original number on the number line, then moving to the left on the number line as many units as the number being subtracted. So with that in mind, I would actually like you to pause the video and why don't you try these 3 subtraction problems, keeping in mind the movement on the real number line. All right, I hope these 3 went well for you. And now, I'm sure that you could have done these in your head, but thinking about these addition and subtraction problems with regard to the real number line might shed some light about why we do certain things when we start adding or subtracting negative numbers. All right, so what happens when we start adding or subtracting negative numbers? And I'd actually like to start with a theorem that highlights the way that I like to think about negative numbers. For every positive number, we'll call it A, there exists a negative number, negative A, such that when you add the 2, the sum is 0. And when there are 2 numbers, one of which is positive and one of which is negative, that add to 0, those 2 numbers are called additive inverses of one another. So for example, 5 plus negative 5 equals 0. And so we would say 5 and negative 5 are additive inverses of one another. 12 plus negative 12 is 0. 12 and negative 12 are additive inverses of one another. 173 plus negative 173 is 0. 173 and negative 173 are additive inverses of one another. So in each of these cases, we started with a number and then added some other number to get 0. And my claim is, for each of these original numbers, 5, 12, and 173, there was something we could have subtracted from them to get 0. For instance, I think that 5 minus 5 is 0. And I think that 12 minus 12 is 0. And of course, I also think that 173 minus 173 is 0. So very interestingly, in our first example, adding negative 5 was the same thing as subtracting positive 5. In our second example, adding negative 12 was the same thing as subtracting positive 12. In our third, adding negative 173 was the same as subtracting positive 173. And actually, this is going to be true all of the time. In general, adding a negative number is the same as subtracting that negative number's additive inverse, which of course is positive. So, if we look at the three examples below, in each case, we're adding a negative number. And to be quite frank, I don't like adding negative numbers. I don't like subtracting negative numbers. I like adding positive numbers or subtracting positive numbers. So I'd like to be operating on a positive number here. But my claim is, for each of these three examples, we could rewrite this so that instead of adding a negative number, we're subtracting a positive number. So in our first example, I claim that this is going to be the exact same as 38 minus positive 25. And that's no problem for us. We know that's going to be 13. So what I'd like you to do is why don't you pause the video and take care of these next two problems in which we're adding a negative number. First, by rewriting it as subtracting a positive number, and then actually finding the answer. All right, I hope those went well for you, and I hope that we found that rewriting these problems so that we were subtracting a positive number made them much easier for us to solve. All right, well, what happens if we subtract a negative number? All right, let's recall our theorem from just before. Remember that adding a negative number was the same as subtracting its additive inverse, which would be positive. And in much the same way, subtracting a negative number is the same as adding its additive inverse, which is again going to be a positive number. So in our first example, if we're subtracting negative 3, that's going to be the exact same thing as adding positive 3. And of course we know that 7 plus 3 is 10. And changing this problem so that we were operating on a positive number made it so much easier for us to handle. So what I'd like you to do is to pause the video and please rewrite these second two problems so that we're adding a positive number, and then go ahead and find the answer. All right, I hope those went well for you. And again, I hope that rewriting those problems so that we were operating on a positive number made them a lot easier for you to solve. All right, time for some practice problems. Why don't you pause the video now and please take care of these 8 addition and subtraction problems. When appropriate, please rewrite the problem so that you're adding or subtracting a positive number instead of a negative number. And when you're done, please play the video and we'll see how it went. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you enjoyed.